Hello everybody, welcome to today's show. Very, very excited to be back and in action, letting you know about what is to come, for 2022, what you can expect. We will be doing that later in the show, but we do have a good one for you today. As always, here's what is on tap. We're talking about Omicron, of course. Omicron cases appear to peak in the U.S., but deaths continue to rise. Deaths are going to be probably a lagging indicator there, as we know, 14 days in advance. So, we will see how bad it gets. Really, I think is going to be the tough thing about it. But, just metabolizing COVID in many, many different ways today, because we're also going to be talking a little and going through this and reacting to this pretty big clip. It's been around Twitter a lot with two people who I personally really do distrust politically, and just give me the political heebie-jeebies, I guess you could say, with Richie Torres and Bari Weiss talking about how tough it is with COVID or whatever. We'll see what they have to say. I will get into it. Also, we're going to be doing a little bit of international travel today as well, talking about Brazil and talking about the bloody United Kingdom. Thanks for joining us here today, back on Newsflash. It's great to be here. All right, let's get into it. So we are starting today with a report on COVID from here in the New York Times. New coronavirus cases, they are falling nationally, signaling that Omicron-fueled spike that has infected tens of millions of Americans, packed hospitals, and shattered records has finally begun to relent, which is a very, very good sign there. More and more states have passed a peak in new cases in recent days as glimmers of progress have spread from a handful of eastern cities to much of the country. Through Friday, the country was averaging about 720,000 new cases a day, down from about 807,000 last week. New coronavirus hospital admissions have leveled off. And, if we're looking at this wave here, I've come back to this time and time again with coronavirus. We can keep going through and keep, most Americans, are, I think, kind of catching on to this. We can keep going through, news cycle after news cycle about each different coronavirus issue. But I think when it comes down to it, the facts are simple. We know with the Omicron variant, it was significantly less bad than past variants. And that doesn't change that, this is important. It doesn't change that, future variants couldn't be worse. So, we know it's not bad. I think, the best thing to do is make sure that people who are symptomatic get the treatment, but people who are not symptomatic and can't stay home from work, and people that are not symptomatic can, go about living their lives, because, that is, and especially with regards to, school and with masks, which I think is kind of going to be a big problem, politically as well, because this is a very interesting issue, with many, many different layers in terms of, reality and, what kind of Americans feel and stuff like that. Because, it is true that for most parts of the country, if you don't live in a big city or around, a big kind of central area with a lot of people, which is a big chunk of the country, COVID is pretty much over for you, especially if you're, if you're vaxxed, and, that is, a big situation. And the thing is here, I think COVID is not over, at a national level. We have not had that released yet. And that is, I think, really what people want here. There are more hopeful data points here that emerge. The threat is by no means past. The United States continues to identify far more infections a day than in any prior surge, and some states in the West, South, and Great Plains are still seeing sharp increases. Many hospitals are full, and the deaths continue to mount, with more than 2,100 announced most days. But following a month of extraordinary rates of case growth, block long lines at testing centers, and military deployments to bolster understaffed ICUs, the declining new case tallies offered a sense of relief to virus-weary Americans, especially in the Northeast and upper Midwest parts, where trends were most encouraging. But After another round of masking up or hunkering down, some were considering what might look like if conditions continued to improve, especially after this wave. The level of exhaustion in New York City cannot be exaggerated, and the level of numbness is quite significant. Since Mark Levine, I think he's really right about that. Like, it's kind of like really the national mood here is with COVID is actual exhaustion. Like, we're seeing it come through, and I think probably the best thing the Biden, I heard this, being suggested because what is Biden, or what does Biden really need to do? Like, it's not really so much about, because if you look at what is the reality, by and large for most Americans, COVID, as I said, not really being it's not really a big factor in people's lives, other than school closures, which are that have happened for the past few weeks since the beginning of the year, which largely are going to probably be temporary. But you can, in a lot of places, if you're vaccinated, you can go with the mask. You can go, you can go without the mask in a lot of places. Like, it is kind of slowly getting back to normal. In some parts, that in some parts it isn't, and that contributes to the real situation. But in the parts where it's like the least back to normal, those are the parts where the media reaction, the media and culture driving centers are the strongest. So again, I guess what I'll say is, I don't know how much sense this makes, is that nationally, I think when it comes down to it, we haven't come up and said that yes, COVID is over. And I think probably the best way to do it is lifting those mask mandates and just increasing vaccination, going hard on the vaccination still, because I think that's probably the smartest way to do it and kind of keep cases down in general. But if you were able to say, guarantee that employees could take, I think the smart play to do here is, like, if you could guarantee that employees, for example, were able to take sick leave when they had symptoms of COVID, and that people would be able to have paid time off if they got the virus and had symptoms for a reasonable period of time. I'm not I don't feel comfortable putting a reasonable time on that with infectious period, how much you're contagious, how much you're symptomatic, what is the balance there? I don't know, and I think really many people do. We saw with the CDC anyway, but what really I think is important is that when it comes down to it, you have to have this return, this sense that restrictions are easing, at least at the federal level, because the impact of Biden coming out there, and with having increased vaccinations, increased testing infrastructure getting up to really where it should be, kicking the state into gear to make sure that we can live and actually function with all the deaths that we've now pretty much completely culturally shrugged off. These 2,100 to 3,000 deaths a day now that we're going to be seeing for COVID for at least for the foreseeable future. We now have to build the infrastructure to live with this virus. And what does it say about the fact that we're able to do that now culturally? What does it say that we do that about car accidents? It's just a part of our society as it is at this point. But really, what Biden has to do, if he was politically smart, and he was if the Biden administration was a politically alive force, which I've seen no evidence that it is, the thing that they would have to do is make sure, build this infrastructure and say, okay, here's how we live with the virus. You have this paid time off, but you can go into a store without a mask. You just drop the silly game. Your kids are able to go to school. You don't have to worry. It's not even the nitty gritty of the restrictions here are, again, they're mostly going to be decided anyway at a state and local level. But what really I think would be positive, and something that Biden is perfectly capable of doing with his personality, is getting up there on TV and saying, when it comes down to it, you don't need to worry. We're out of the woods, get vaccinated. I think that's always a good thing to do. But I think a lot of people would be more inclined to get vaccinated if restrictions were dropped down. If, Biden came on TV, did what he did in the spring, but actually kind of stuck to it, give it a little bit more of a flourish. Maybe as the weather starts to, the first nice warm week, he gets up on there and goes, you know what, we're canning the mask mandate stuff. I feel like that would be, and most of the restrictions would already be decided at, and have been already decided at the federal and local level. But, saying, the pandemic is over, let's party, that kind of thing. Pull a Boris Johnson. He's done that multiple times. Do that in some ways, but, maybe not in the ways that Boris Johnson is currently in trouble for. So, yeah, but good news for Omicron, definitely there. Cases going down. But that is one side of the story. But the case, if we're dealing with this from a non-political, kind of personal, kind of American aspect of it here. If you look at actually the globe, how do we stop this thing? It is insane that we have not vaccinated the global south and all of these other countries yet, because that is literally a huge the vaccine disparity, the vaccine apartheid here that pretty much everybody has been calling, everyone actually examining this is calling this out as the number one contributing factor, contributing to more of these variants rising. And the same people who are fighting like hell to make sure that these people in the global south don't have access to the vaccine because intellectual property, they won't be able to, whatever bullcrap they throw at the media's faces, and whatever Bill Gates wants to say about it, he is, and those people are, single-handedly responsible for continuing the pandemic and worsening society as a whole. Because, Americans, they're going to need a fourth, fifth booster. People are going to hate vaccines. They're going to hate, this whole, vaccine skepticism, hesitancy, whatever, going to go up more and more and more. And meanwhile, people in the global south will be dying this virus, more variants will come out, and possibly a much stronger one that will be much more lethal, is very, very possible. There's no rule that said variants, get less and less and less and less lethal over time, although it does tend to be what happens. It is not always what happens. So, that is a very, very uncomfortable thing to say the least. And it's you never really know you just never really know how to judge and really why this story and this kind of angle on this story has not gotten, I think, so much more attention. We have just gotten started on 2022 here on the Spencer Walsh Radio Network. We are going to let you know a little bit about what we have coming your way in 2022. Of course, it is Newsflash every Sunday and Thursday on the Spencer Walsh Radio Network. And, back on that 2-time-a-week schedule. We'll also be working on a brand new season of Hidden History to be coming in February. Very, very incredibly blown away about how that was just received last time over the holiday season. So we will definitely be working on a new season coming, February, mid-February, late February, probably the date on that one. Finally, of course, the Spencer Walsh Show, music, news, culture, all that stuff will be coming back within probably next week. We'll let you know on the specific date on that. Should be next week. A new episode on that. We'll publicize that when we know more. All right, let's move on. And it's a little interesting situation here in Brazil. I've been noticing because we are, looking at the 2022 general elections coming out. It's actually a very nuanced story here. It's a little bit of a personal disappointment, a bit of a worry for me as someone who I personally previously was really, really respected. Had a little bit of, a little bit of a worrying sign for me, but you can't really just go too critical right away with someone like Lula. But it has been because it all started with this tweet here because if you're a person on Twitter at all, political Twitter anyway, left-wing Twitter, whatever, you know something about how Glenn Greenwald has just been absolutely hammered for a variety of reasons, some more justifiable than others, I would say, about, his time online with, in relationship to, like, trans, his trans takes, his defense of, January 6th, people are just always mad for whatever, I don't even know. But the point is, he's obviously very prominent in Brazil, well known for incredible journalism he did, taking down the Bolsonaro government and their collaboration with the same people that put away Lula, pretty much a lawfare coup, taking out the popular president of Brazil on bogus corruption charges to clear the way for the current fascist, Amazon-burning, right-wing president, Jair Bolsonaro, who, was threatened to murder Greenwald when they put out the reporting or something like that. Just crazy, crazy stuff. But, in a sign of really how crazy it's gotten, I don't know if this is really Greenwald just being like, we got to do this to own the libs, but, it could be more the fact that he's married to this guy who is a left-wing figure in Brazil's parliament, who was currently part of who was part of a party called the PSOL, which is a very left-wing party, the Socialist Liberation, something like that party. And then he left recently. David Miranda is the husband of Greenwald. He has left PSOL for an ideologically incoherent PDT, which is a party of loosely connected local power coalitions ranging from center-right to center-left. He attacked Lula and announced that he and Glenn will support Ciro Gomes for president, not Lula here. So I personally have not been able to see, I wasn't able to find that announcement, and Greenwald kind of in a very unclear way said that was false. The Telesur tweet was false. I feel like because the interesting story about this is just like how much Greenwald made of all the stuff he did, free Lula in Brazil, all that stuff. So PDT was founded by the legendary leftist Leonel Brizola. This is Brian Muir, by the way, the Telesur journalist, great kind of left-wing outlet that covers, the South and, Latin America and things like that. So it was founded by a leftist, but, also made home to this prosperity gospel guy who had a party in the governor's mansion to celebrate the first 100 kills by the military police before he switched to PSB. Miranda has yet to win a congressional election as he took power in substitute for John Willis, who left the country after repeated death threats from militia-affiliated members of the Bolsonaro coalition after not getting enough votes to be elected congressman himself. Talking about Miranda there. One of the first things I learned about Brazilian politics when I moved here was most people view politicians who jump from party to party as opportunists. Ciro Gomes himself switched parties 5 times. It's probably one of the reasons he's polling at 4%. So Ciro Gomes here, pretty much to me, seems like the Elizabeth Warren kind of running as a careerist. Let's bring all the people together. Let's get the smartest people in the room. We can figure this out. Kind of very much a technocratic, meritocratic style government. From the research that I've done in limited, grant you, I'm not like pulling out any scholarly articles here, but It does seem like that's kind of the rough equivalent of him, and then you got someone like Lula, who's a bit more of a standard bearer for the left, more to the Bernie Sanders type, who in the sense that he has much more kind of popular support, name recognition, coalition, like more popularity, whatever. But it does seem like there is a legitimate beef that either David, Miranda, or Glenn have with Lula, is that he has nominated this guy Alekin, who is a very right wing guy. He's most likely going to nominate him when he runs to be running mate. So that is kind of a unity kind of ticket. Someone who was very much critical of the Lula government when he was in power in the early 2000s, earlier in the, I think it was like late aughts to early 2010s. But it was very, very clear, that this is someone who is not ideologically aligned with Lula. He said so himself, trying to, grand unity ticket was pretty much his way of looking at it there, which is something that, to me, it raises a bit of eyebrows. I don't like to see it. But I think, in terms of when it comes to, I think the solution to that, by the way, though, is not to support someone like Cyril Gomes. I mean, I think the hope was that maybe, I don't know, again, because a lot of the stuff I don't exactly know if I'm reading it right. The hope was on the part of Miranda and Greenwald that Gomes would be put instead of Alekin as the VP pick, combining the left-wing vote there a little bit, because, Gomes himself has made left-wing statements in the past, seems to be a pretty kind of left-wing guy there, but not, the same level of popularity. But it does kind of seem, the stock markets were jumping when, Lula was talking with this guy in Brazil. Like, they were very, very happy to have this kind of right-wing guy in there as Lula's VP. So it does seem like there's a legitimate beef, but it does seem like a story we'll keep following. And, keep an eye on here as the Brazilian election is coming up in, I believe, just a few months. So, interesting to watch. All right, let's go to Navarro Media in Great Britain, where we have a really incredible situation going on there with the Tory party. Boris Johnson in a lot of trouble for a lot of different things here. Just Tory MPs turning on him. Pretty much all the conservative dirty laundry is coming out in the wake of parties after party after party. Boris Johnson lying about it. Proof he was at the party coming out, proof that he was lying coming out. And this has been going on for the course of several months, all kind of culminating last week when a Tory MP kind of crosses the floor and becomes a Labour MP right before, Boris Johnson goes to the Parliament to get yelled at in his, weekly session. So that was, because that is the thing that, the moments in British politics most Americans know is like when they're in the big house and everyone's yelling. That happens every Wednesday, where pretty much the president goes in and gets yelled at by all the members of what would be like the House. So that happened, and Boris Johnson, under an incredible amount of pressure, just a few days later, two more incredibly damaging scandals come out that allege that the Tory whip, that's what they call him, the Tory MP who is in charge of whipping votes, which is, it's a position in the House of Representatives, but is much more serious. In Britain, they have all the leverage, they have all the, dirt on people to vote, get them to vote a certain way for the party, and especially the Tories are known to be brutal at this. According to the guy who crossed over this past week, one of the big reasons that he did it, the impetus for it, was that the since resigned education secretary, who was caught snogging someone in his office during COVID, who was not his wife. But Matt Hancock is his name. He was apparently threatening to cut funding, or cut, the creation of a primary or a high school in this guy's district. So he was like, I'm out. So yeah, this is the great Ash Sarkar in Navarro Media talking about this. So yesterday, Tory MP William Ragg, chair of the Public Administration and Constitutional Affairs Committee, encouraged his colleagues to report machinations of the whips to ministers or to even go to the police in the face of an increasingly aggressive government whipping operation intended to save Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Ragg, the chair of the Public Administration and Constitutional Affairs Committee, said that a number of MPs have faced intimidation in recent days after declaring or assumed to have declared their desire for a vote of no confidence in Johnson. Rebel conservatives, known as pork pie plotters for reasons which are tedious, have alleged that some whips, and the nicknames that the whips have for these guys are coming out. It's just leaking all over the place. Complete Tory infighting at this point. They've alleged that whips have threatened to release embarrassing details of their personal lives to the press, or even cut funding to their constituencies. As all eyes turn to the chairman of the Backbenchers 1922 committee, Sir Graham Brady's inbox. So pretty much the way it works is if Tory party MPs, members of parliament, want to kick out Boris Johnson, 15% of them, 54 letters, have to go into this guy's, Sir Graham Brady. He's the guy who's in control of the 1922 committee, which is the group of non-minister, pretty much everyone in the Tory party that is not part of the government, not minister for something. They're on the backbench. They're part of the 1922 committee. And if 54 of them send in a letter that say they have no confidence in good old Boris, he is going to have to resign, or not resign, but he'll have to stand down and face a leadership election within the Tory party. So these heavy-handed tactics, however, backfired in what's being described as a stunning move by people who don't have hobbies. Former Tory MP Christian Wakeford recently defected to the Labour Party, crediting Conservative Party whips, threatening to pull funding for his school in his constituency if he did not back the government as the reason, and crucially, his slim majority of 400 delivered in 2019 by ex-Labour MP Ivan Lewis, taking 1,700 votes off his opponent by running as an independent. Definitely across the floor because he believes in Labour, not just because he believes he can hang on to an MP salary because of it. Says this is a tweet from a journalist who reacting to the move there. You can see how the being told that tying your reputation to a prime minister who is taking the polls is the equivalent of a political safe word might be something of a turnoff. Johnson found himself being asked awkward questions about whether colleagues were being threatened and intimidated, which he obviously denied seeing any evidence of. So the brutality of the whip system is nothing new, as the parliamentary dark art of whipping isn't exactly a secret. Indeed, most A-level politics students could probably tell you about the little black book wielded by the whip's office to keep their flock of perfidious narcissists in line. A list was circulated years ago purporting to link MPs to various personal misdeeds, from the innocuous, which is consensual romantic relationships, to the downright evil, coerced abortions or to conceal affairs. While none of the claims have been substantiated, it painted a vivid picture of political enforcement operation powered by shame, in the sense that a personally compromised MP was more valuable than one with a spotless record. But the brutality of the whip system doesn't have utilitarian value. Indeed, some might argue that you attract more flies with honey than arsenic. Maybe a good way of putting it there. That does seem to have its own appeal. So this is a tweet from a journalist here. Con MP William Ragg accuses number 10 of intimidation, breaching ministerial code by threatening to withdraw money from constituencies, to leak stories about rebels, urges them to go to the police or party authorities. So this is a Tory MP explaining, this is in a documentary, this is about how he whips MPs. This is like a Tory whip explaining how it's done.
Anyone who was in trouble would come to the whips and tell them the truth. They'd say, no, I'm in a jam. Can you help? It might be debt. It might be scandal involving small boys, or any kind of scandal which a member seemed likely to be mixed up in. They'd come and ask if we could help. And if we could, we did. And we would do everything we can, because we would store up brownie points. That sounds a pretty nasty reason, but it's one of the reasons. Is if we can get a chap out of trouble, then he'll do as we ask forevermore.
Yeah, if we can get a chap out of trouble, he'll do what we ask forevermore, That, and it might be a scandal involving young boys, maybe the two best phrases to understand British politics, in general, just combining those two. Anyway, moving past that, writing the Telegraph in the Cameron years, former New Labour advisor John McTernan described the macho culture of the Blairite. This is during the big Labour government, most successful Labour government. This is their whipping operation. John McTernan described the macho culture of the whipping operation. One cabinet minister spoke of being pinned to the wall as a new MP and having his balls viciously twisted by a Labour whip. "Son, you've done nothing to annoy me," growled the enforcer. "Just think what I'll do if you cross me." Most grotesquely in the Commons bar, on the day of the Iraq War vote, an MP has said to have remarked, "Hear that noise, John? It's the sound of limbs being broken." So, it's not. They're not really normal people there in the House of Commons. It doesn't take a psychiatrist to think the gleeful sadism of parliamentary whipping operation is pretty revealing. You could, why are these people enjoying this so much? People who get into politics are objectively dweebs. It's true. I hate to say it. It's true. It's true. But joining the whip's office is a thrilling opportunity to metamorphosize from a once bullied nerd to a fearsome, seizing tormentor. One who can take the other nerd's balls and twist them right up, The most tyrannical of chief whips would be no match for 5 minutes with a therapist. As Giggs might have said, you're not a gangster, you're just a parliament version. Armchair psychology aside, the whipping operation can work when shielded, only work really, when shielded from the public view by the media's willful blind eye. Because again, they all know this stuff. They're all friends. They all hang out together. So the spotlight shown on the Johnson's whip's office prevents yet another weakening of his already wobbly authority. You can't wield someone's secret over them if they're talking to the press first. Indeed, the writing has been on the wall for Chief Whip Mark Spencer since the failed plot to save now former MP Owen Patterson resulted in mutiny on the conservative backbenchers. Not very good. At all, it's not been good. That is what you really cannot have happen if you're a whip here. So the whip's office have been accused of arrogant complacency by Tory MPs in recent days and fatally mishandling the Wakeford defection. It's easy to look like a big man in the tiny corridors of Portcullis House, but a tough guy reputation shrinks under the glare of public attention and just a little bit of sunlight going into those dark Westminster halls there. So it really, really is incredible as we are watching kind of the darkest, dirtiest parts of British politics coming under wraps and are coming out of wraps, coming into the public view here really for the first time. And it is not pretty at all. We'll do a little bit of Bill Maher just after this.
Beat me up, Scotty. Beat me up, Scotty.
It's news flash.
Whipping excursion. I gotta pick up that person. In the trap, whipping that working. You're not a gangster, you're just an internet version. Whipping that Wurzel. You know me, got the littlest circle.